How does a kid that's 13 end up holding a book like this? Well, when both of your parents are financial planners, you don't exactly get normal bedtime stories. While other kids were reading their favorite books or fiction, I was being introduced to personal finance, compound interest, and building wealth. This exact book is David Chilton's original Wealthy Barber. It was genuinely the first book I ever read cover to cover in my entire life. When it came to David Chilton's book, The Wealthy Barber, learning about a small town barber teaching everyday Canadians how to build financial independence, it was something I could relate to and I couldn't put the book down. With David Chilton recently announcing that he plans to step back and retire after 40 years of guiding Canadians through financial literacy, I've been reflecting on his massive impact on me, and I thought the man easily belongs on the Mount Rushmore of Canadian financial literacy. Reading his work as a 13-year-old kid didn't just help me start building my own personal wealth at an early age, it fundamentally changed my career trajectory and what I wanted to do when I grew up. It inspired me to go on and become a certified financial planner myself, so I could take some of the principles I learned from him and help share it with my clients. Even with that huge head start in wealth generation, I wasn't immune to making major mistakes along the way. If you stick around towards the end of the video, I will share 2 exact investment mistakes that I made early on, and mistakes most people make when they start investing. So the part of the Wealthy Barber that really got me hooked was the simple math of compounding over time. Seeing the visual proof of what happens to your investments, your money over 20, 30, 40 years made me hungry to start saving as early as humanly possible. When I was 13 years old, my mom opened an in trust for account for me. It's also commonly known as an ITF account. If you're a parent or grandparent watching this, opening up an ITF account for a child is one of the simplest ways to give them a financial head start. It's an informal trust held in the child's name. It can hold virtually any type of investment in it, from low-cost index ETFs to individual stocks. Capital gains are generally taxed in the child's lower tax bracket as well, allowing the money to compound far more efficiently while maintaining control until they're the age of majority. Opening up this account allowed my mom to legally invest money on my behalf before I turned 18, giving me a massive head start on long-term wealth accumulation. Once that account was opened, my parents used it to gamify my savings. Whenever I received birthday money, holiday gifts, or earned any cash doing side jobs like mowing lawns, 50% would automatically go into my savings or my ITF account, and the other 50% I could spend however I liked. But my mom added a massive incentive to keep me motivated throughout all those years. For every single dollar I chose to save, she would match it dollar for dollar. That was a 100% dollar match. Think of it as a parent-funded employer matching program. Now, I want to pause here and say, I acknowledge I was extremely fortunate that my parents had the ability to do this in the first place. Not everyone has that. However, I think the core message is the most important part about that. It's about starting to save early and learn a disciplined approach to financial literacy. When I finally turned 18, we transitioned from saving in the ITF account to what's called a tax-free savings account, or a TFSA. That account didn't even exist when I was reading the original Wealthy Barber book, but it's in his updated books now, of course, and it is a prime location for Canadian wealth building today, especially in your early years when you have lower taxable income. A question I've been asked a handful of times is, what is my first memory about money? My first personal finance memory as a child was when my grandparents bought me a scratch ticket. I scratched it and I won $50. To a 13-year-old kid, $50 felt like $1 million. And I'm not gonna lie, my immediate unfiltered instinct was to sprint to a toy store or something along those lines and just spend it all. My parents did stop me from doing that, and thankfully they did. They told me to take a breath and recommended I put the full $50 into my ITF account at that time. Instead of buying a plastic toy that would be collecting dust in a landfill somewhere today, I decided to take their advice and save the $50. It basically compounded quietly for decades, and it actually formed part of the initial lump sum I took to buy my first home. That decision was a real-world marshmallow test. If you aren't familiar with Stanford's famous marshmallow test experiment, psychologists placed a single marshmallow in front of children and told them, you can eat this marshmallow right now, or you can wait and you can get 2 marshmallows. Of course, most of the kids decided, no, I just want a marshmallow right now, and would take the one and eat it. But by choosing to invest that $50, I chose the 2 marshmallows in the future. I traded instant gratification for a tangible asset, which was real estate in this instance. That single experiment cemented my mindset toward delayed gratification forever. Think about your own daily spending for a second. Is it a random online purchase from Amazon, an impulse subscription, or going to a shopping mall and saying, I need to spend money on something? The goal isn't to never spend money. It's recognizing when you're sacrificing future independence for a short-term marshmallow today. So for decades, I was saving, and any jobs, I was putting money aside. But fast forward to graduating from university. While I moved back home from upper New York State, I lived with my parents. I was grinding through my courses and rigorous licensing exams to officially become a certified financial planner. At that exact same time, my fiance and I set a major financial goal for ourselves. We wanted to buy our first home together. And we wanted to save enough that we had a 20% down payment. And as most people know, 20% is the minimum you need to avoid CMHC fees. Since we were both right out of university, we really wanted to make our dollar stretch further. We were able to pull this off in just 2 years. I committed to the most aggressive saving strategy I'd done in my entire life. And for those 2 years while I was living in my parents' basement, I was saving between 70 and 80% of my income every paycheck I earned. So here was the exact allocation that I used when I was saving at that point in time. The allocation of my paycheck was pretty simple. 70% was going directly to the savings for my house down payment. 10% I was still keeping as a long-term pay yourself first retirement savings. And then the other 20% remaining was money I could spend on anything I wanted. Now, how did we actually pull off saving 80% of a paycheck consistently without hating our lives or surviving on bread and water? We didn't live in a dark room starving ourselves. In The Wealthy Barber, Chilton always talks about paying yourself first, but he also talks about how you don't have to be miserable or deprive yourself from life's enjoyments. And this ties directly into one of my favorite David Chilton principles, which is maximizing joy units per dollar spent. It's really about eliminating mindless spending or leaks in your monthly budget that you won't miss if you cut it out tomorrow. Cutting out some of these leaks within your monthly budget allows you to focus your money on things that bring you true happiness. For us, it was traveling, building long-term security. Fortunately for us, my fiance was a flight attendant, so we were able to get discounts and still fly and travel very cheaply at that time and stay 100% on track with this aggressive, crazy goal. And we really didn't feel like we missed out on anything throughout that period of time. Today, when people find out I'm a certified financial planner, the most common question I get asked is, what's the best stock I should buy right now? Or what's the secret to market predictions? Everyone is looking for a shortcut, a hot stock tip, or a lottery ticket. My answer is always the same, to be honest. Most people don't want to hear it because it isn't flashy or sexy, but it's pay yourself first, automate it, and stay consistent. In David Chilton's original book, he advocated for saving at least 10% of your income. When I talk to people about automating their savings, I constantly hear two major excuses. The number one is, I'm waiting for the market to calm down. And number two is, I literally have no more money left at the end of the month to save. Now, I get it. And to the people out there who's saying, I can't afford to do that at this moment in time, one analogy I heard recently was, what if the government decided to tax you an extra $100 per paycheck starting tomorrow? Would you go bankrupt? My guess is no. You'd probably complain, you'd be unhappy about it, but you'd adjust your lifestyle and you'd figure it out. Automating your savings works the exact same way. If the money gets pulled automatically on payday before you see it, your brain adapts instantly. If your 20% or even 10% feels impossible right now, start with whatever you can. Even if it's $25 or $50 a paycheck, you can always dial it up later. But building the automated habit is what matters most. And most clients that I talk to, when I say, how does it feel month to month with what we're starting to save? It's almost always the same response. I don't even miss it. And to the people waiting for the markets to calm down, everything to feel normal again, if you look at market history, the world always feels a little bit uncertain. There's always a crisis du jour occurring at some point. If you rely on your emotions, you will constantly talk yourself out of investing and automating your savings. But automating it removes human hesitation, the psychology of fear, and is really the best way to approach it. It forces you to keep buying through every single market cycle, if it's going up or down, without overthinking things. Looking back today at age 35 and thinking about my initial savings and building wealth at such a young age, I've had over 22 years of continuous compound interest. Starting that savings at age 13 gave me a 10 to 15 year head start over most people my age, which is an incredible advantage. However, despite having all this education early on and being ahead of the game, I still made mistakes along the way. There were two major investing mistakes that I think about all the time that I wish I would have done differently. So I want to share those with you, and the goal is you don't make those same mistakes. So mistake number one was poor asset allocation. And really what I mean by this is not being aggressive enough. When I was 13 years old, obviously a dollar means a lot more to someone at that period of time. And I was terrified of the thought of seeing my investments or my account go into the red. I wish in hindsight I was a lot more aggressive with my money. Instead of holding a low-cost equity portfolio designed for long-term growth, which was completely appropriate for a teenager with a 40-year time horizon, I put a lot of my money in conservative balanced portfolios, structured for someone most likely approaching or already in retirement. I let short-term fear restrict my long-term potential, and it left a lot of money on the table. And finally, mistake number two, investing in active mutual funds and high-fee MER funds that dragged my returns over time. When I first started out, I put my money into actively managed mutual funds. Back then, low-cost index funds and ETFs weren't as easily accessible as they are today. David Chilton himself acknowledged relying on active managed mutual funds became a massive trap in Canada due to high fees or MERs. As a certified financial planner, I now point my clients directly to empirical research like the SPIVA Canadian Scorecard. Year after year, the SPIVA data shows the same thing. Over a 10-year period, more than 90% of active mutual fund managers in Canada failed to beat their benchmark index. You would have been better off just buying a low-cost ETF than buying these fund managers. Avoiding high fees and staying aggressive in low-cost index funds early on would have likely resulted in a significantly larger nest egg for me today. When I pick up this book today, I don't just see a personal financial advice book. I see the foundation of my entire life and career, all in one book. Reading David Chilton's work as a kid didn't just help me save $50 from a scratch ticket or buy my first home in 2 years. It fundamentally shaped who I am and how I think about money today. It's the exact reason I went on to become a certified financial planner, so I could take these principles and pass them on to my clients, building real financial freedom. If there's one core takeaway I hope you get from my story, it's that building true wealth isn't about finding a secret code or stock pick, timing the market, or getting lucky. It's about taking simple, unsexy habits, automating them early in, and giving compounding interest decades to do its magic. The absolute best time for you to begin compounding and saving was 10 or 20 years ago. But the second best time is now, today. And for those of you interested, David Chilton just did a new version of the Wealthy Barber that's out in stores right now. So I encourage you to go buy it and give it to a child, give it to a grandchild to read, and hopefully they can learn a thing or two from it as well, just as I did. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care for now.